In the golden savannas of Obaji, where the sun painted the skies in ochre and gold, there lived a man named Chief Damba, the richest man in the region. His name was whispered with awe and envy, for he owned the finest lands, the fattest cattle, and the largest cocoa farms for miles. But Chief Damba had one persistent problem: he had no son. Now, in Obaji, having sons was not just tradition, it was expectation. Sons carried your name. Sons guarded your wealth. Sons were the umbrellas of your old age. At least, that's what the elders said. And Chief Damba? He had 7 daughters. His wife, Mama Ajua, was a gentle, sharp-tongued woman who didn't suffer fools, including her husband. When the 3rd daughter arrived, and Damba sighed the sigh of all disappointed African fathers, she looked at him squarely and said, "You are lucky, Damba. Girls are flowers. Sons are spears. And flowers bring more joy." "But spears defend your compound," he grumbled. "Spears also get you stabbed," she retorted. From then on, Mama Ajua made sure each daughter grew up knowing 2 things. Their father wanted a son, but they were going to prove him wrong. Each daughter was named by Ajua, with intention. 1. Adama, the wise one. Adama asked questions before she could even talk properly. At age 6, she was already correcting the village teacher's grammar. One day, she found her father arguing with the chief of Kenti town over land boundaries. She walked in, and said, "Excuse me, sirs. According to Clause 4 of the Land Tenure Act of 1958. Everyone blinked. The deal was settled that day. Adama would go on to study law in Ghana, then Oxford. She returned to Obaji to become the first female high court judge in the region. Her courtroom became so legendary, even goats stopped chewing when her name was mentioned. 2. Zori, the beautiful one. Zori had a smile that made grown men forget their names. But she wasn't just beautiful, she had taste. At 10, she stitched her own birthday dress using old curtains. She studied fashion in Lagos and launched Zori Styles, a line that fused traditional African prints with modern chic. Her clothes graced runways in Paris, but her heart stayed in Obaji, where she opened a school for young seamstresses. She married a quiet Ghanaian photographer who couldn't sew a button but captured every angle of her genius. 3. Kessia, the just one. Kessia had a strong sense of fairness. As a child, she once led a chicken protest after their neighbor cooked a hen that wasn't his. She had 4 chicks. Kessia shouted. She had dreams. She studied public administration and returned to Obaji to run the town council. Under her, corruption dropped, and infrastructure blossomed. She introduced streetlights and bins, 2 things Obaji had never seen before. She married a former journalist who respected her too much to interrupt her mid-sentence. Their 3 children could recite the Constitution before bedtime. 4. Lena, the kind one. Lena had healing hands. When anyone fell ill, it was Lena who stayed up all night, brewing herbal teas and humming lullabies. She studied medicine and built the Ajua Memorial Clinic, named after her mother. People came from 5 villages to be treated. Lena refused no one. If you had no money, she'd just ask for a goat later. She married a nurse, and together they became known as the Healers of Obaji. They raised 2 daughters and a mischievous boy who once tried to perform a surgery on his baby sister's doll. 5. Ao, the joyful one. Ao laughed like she invented happiness. She turned every situation into a joke, and yet, she was fiercely ambitious. While still a teenager, she turned part of her father's cocoa plantation into a modern agribusiness. She branded it Cocoa Gold, and it became the first local product to export chocolate bars to Europe. Ao married a German agricultural consultant who came to teach soil management but ended up proposing after tasting her homemade cocoa tea. Together, they raised 2 children and 3 dogs. The dogs were multilingual. 6. Tari, the brave one. Tari was fearless. At age 8, she climbed a palm tree to rescue a cat. At 15, she broke up a market fight by stepping in with a loud whistle and a frying pan. She joined the army, then later became a peace negotiator across West Africa. When she returned home, she ran for parliament, and won. Her husband was a poet who once wrote her a love letter using only war metaphors. Their house was full of books, swords, and laughter. Their twins often argued about who was braver, mommy or daddy. 7. Imani, the faithful one. Imani was quiet but spiritually awake. She would sit for hours listening to elders, recording oral histories, and asking about ancestors. She studied philosophy and theology. Eventually, she became a revered interfaith leader, uniting Christians, Muslims, and traditionalists in a peaceful alliance. She ran annual forgiveness festivals where feuding families would literally bury the hatchet, then eat jollof rice together. Imani married late. Her husband, a humble musician, said, "I found God when I found her." They had one son. One Harmattan season, the skies darkened over Obaji, not with clouds, but with conflict. The nearby kingdom of Usonga, known for its warriors and unpredictable king, claimed that the rich lands of Obaji, including part of Damba's cocoa plantations, had once belonged to their ancestors. They demanded tribute. Gold, cattle, or war. Tensions rose. At first, the elders scoffed. "Let us meet with the Usonga emissaries and settle this like men." 3 delegations went. 3 came back insulted and humiliated. Then came the sabotage. Irrigation systems were vandalized. Cattle were stolen. Obaji's cocoa exports were blocked by armed patrols. Farmers panicked. Traders fled. The economy teetered. Chief Damba, now old and frail, called a council. "I am no longer strong enough to fight," he said, "and these politics are bigger than machetes and drums." One elder said gravely, "Perhaps it is time to send for your daughters." Gasps. Daughters. To solve this. What can women do that warriors cannot? Damba, coughing gently, responded, "They were not trained to fight, but they were trained to win." Mama Ajua, standing tall behind him, added, "And if they fail, it won't be because they are women. It will be because the village waited too long to ask." Summoned from across the continent, the 7 daughters of Damba returned to Obaji. Children sang. Women ululated. Men muttered, but watched with hope buried under pride. That night, the daughters met to put together a plan of action. Adama reviewed the Usonga land treaties. Zuri quietly interviewed the Usonga merchants passing through for trade gossip. Kesia traced back tax records and land documents. Lina treated wounded villagers and learned of poisonings suspected to be Usonga's doing. Ayo checked the cocoa trade routes and found the supply blockades were bleeding Obaji dry. Tari scouted the Usonga borders in disguise and learned that the king was facing a civil rift. Imani meditated, then met with the elders of both Obaji and Usonga for spiritual counsel. Together, they crafted a plan. Tari and Kesia sent a secret letter to one of the Usonga king's rivals, a young prince eager to rise. With subtle persuasion, and some financial incentives from Ayo, they convinced him to withdraw support from the king's campaign. Ayo and Zori partnered to reroute cocoa sales through digital platforms and alternative ports, minimizing reliance on land routes. Adama held a public town hall where she presented historical records that proved the Usonga claim had expired 80 years ago when their own ancestors sold the land for marriage dowries. Kesia's sharp cross-questioning of an Usonga elder, who cracked under pressure, exposed corruption in their ranks. While diplomacy unfolded, Lina's clinic became the symbol of Obaji's resilience. Even wounded Usanga soldiers, quietly brought over the border, were treated. This caught the attention of the Usanga Queen Mother, who sent word that she would intervene. Imani met with the ancestral priests of both villages. A traditional ceremony was held in neutral territory. There, she led a powerful prayer for reconciliation, witnessed by both villages. A white dove landed on the shrine during her prayer, interpreted by both sides as a sign of peace. Within weeks, the Usanga king withdrew his demands. A peace accord was signed, negotiated not by men with spears, but women with purpose. The daughters of Damba became legends. Not just for saving Obaji, but for showing that wisdom, creativity, compassion, and courage were not the property of any one gender. The Obaji elders formally declared a new tradition. Any child, male or female, could inherit land, chieftaincy, and leadership if they were worthy. Chief Damba, in his final days, smiled often and coughed less. He passed peacefully, surrounded by his daughters and grandchildren. Obaji became a model for inclusive leadership. Girls were enrolled in schools in record numbers. The Damba Institute for Strategic Peace and Rural Development was founded by Tari and Imani. And every year, on the Day of the Dove, children gathered under the baobab tree and listened to the story. Once there was a man who wished for sons, and the gods gave him something better. When wisdom speaks, let us not ask if it wears trousers or a dress. Let us ask if it brings light. What is your takeaway from this story? Subscribe for more stories that entertain, inspire, and uplift.